Akshay is going to give the next talk, and this is joint work with Sanjay.
Thanks, Ale. I'm going to talk about avoiding exponential loss, the case of multi-key functional encryption, and this is based on joint work with Sanjay. By now, we are all extremely familiar with the notion of indistinguishability obfuscation. We have been hearing it from the morning sessions, and so indistinguishability obfuscation, or IO in short, guarantees that for any two functionally equivalent circuits of same size, obfuscation of C0 is indistinguishable to obfuscation of C1. And starting from the first candidate construction given by Garg, Gentry, Halevi, Raykova, Sahai, and Waters, we now have several candidates that are conjectured to satisfy IO security. If we look at the security guaranteed by IO, namely the indistinguishability based security, it seems extremely weak at first sight. Namely, it is not clear if IO hides any secrets within the program. But IO as a cryptographic notion has proved to be extremely versatile. And as of today, we know only of a few handful of primitives that are not known to be constructible from IO. And as Rachel said in the morning, we have IO which transforms us from crypto mainland to the crypto wonderland. So on the positive side, IO has been used to construct functional encryption. It's been used to construct deniable encryption. It's been used to construct non-interactive key exchange without a trusted setup. It's been used to construct two-round multi-party computation protocols. It's been used to prove hardness of a complexity class PPAD. It's been used to construct trapdoor permutations, and I've just listed a few of the primitives that are not known to be constructible from IO, and there are several other primitives. And it is almost fair to say now IO is a crypto-complete primitive. But using IO in cryptographic applications has several drawbacks. And the first and the major drawback is that all known constructions of IO either require exponential number of assumptions, essentially one assumption per each pair of functionally equivalent circuit, or results in an exponential loss in security if you want to base on a small number of assumptions. And this seems inherent with IO. And an intuitive reason for this is that any reduction from IO to any assumption must first make sure that the two circuits that the adversary provides are functionally equivalent. And to do this, it seems to require exponential time. That is, you have to evaluate the circuit on every input, and this is a reason for an exponential loss in security. And several applications of IO require sub-exponentially hard IO to prove their security on. For those applications, there are two sources of exponential losses. First in the construction of IO, and then from IO to their particular application. So our goal in this line of work is to base applications of IO on polynomial hardness assumptions. And the focus of this talk is on one such application, namely the case of multi-key functional encryption. So before moving on, let's recall the notion of functional encryption, its security properties. And let's see what is meant by multi-key security, and we'll state the results later. So functional encryption is a generalization of public key encryption, and it works as follows. So there is a public key, and data is encrypted under that public key. There is a master secret key that is associated with the public key. The speciality of the master secret key is that it allows you to derive secret keys for various functions. And given a secret key for a specific function and ciphertext encrypting the data, functional encryption allows you to learn the output of the function on the underlying data. And the security guarantee is that nothing else apart from the output is leaked. And this is true even if users collude and pull in their secret keys. And functional encryption emerged as a generalization of attribute-based and predicate encryption. So let's quickly review the syntax of a functional encryption scheme. So there is a setup algorithm that produces a public key and a master secret key. The encrypt algorithm takes the public key and the message to be encrypted and outputs a ciphertext C. The key generation algorithm takes in the master secret key, a function f for which you want to derive the secret key, and produces the functional secret key. And the decryption algorithm takes the secret key for a function, the ciphertext, and outputs y. And the correctness guarantee is that y is equal to the function evaluated on the encrypted value. And a crucial aspect in FE schemes is the efficiency notions. And efficiency of an FE scheme is determined in terms of the running time of the encryption algorithm. So one would typically expect the running time to be dependent only on the security parameter and the length of the message. And this is the case for a fully compact functional encryption scheme. So in a fully compact functional encryption, the running time of the encryption algorithm is some polynomial in the security parameter and the length of the message. But this notion of compactness has been relaxed in several ways, and one such relaxation is that of weakly compact functional encryption, where the running time is allowed to be dependent on the circuit size of the functions for which secret keys are given out. But this dependence is somewhat restricted, and we have been hearing about this in other jargons, namely in terms of sublinear FE in the morning sessions. And here the running time is a polynomial in the security parameter, the length of the message, times some sublinear function of the circuit size. And this has been further generalized to a non-compact FE, where the running time could depend arbitrarily on the circuit size as well. So I just want you to remember for this talk that fully compactness implies weakly compactness, and this in turn implies non-compactness, and that is sufficient for this talk. And we will be discussing the security of FE, but here we will be concentrating on the indistinguishability-based security, and there is a simulation variant as well. The indistinguishability-based security is modeled as a game between the adversary and the challenger, and it proceeds as follows. The challenger samples a public key and a master secret key and gives the public key to the adversary. The adversary then gives two equal length messages M0 and M1, and the challenger tosses a random coin and produces an encryption of the message MB and gives it to the adversary. Till this step, the security game is same as that of public key encryption. And in a FE scheme, the adversary is additionally allowed to query various functions F1 to Fn to the challenger. And the constraint that these functions should satisfy is that Fi of M0 is equal to Fi of M1 for all I. And this is to disallow trivial adversarial winning strategies. And the challenger gives out secret keys corresponding to each of them. And the goal of the adversary is to guess the bit B. And we say that the scheme is secure if the guessing probability of the adversary is negligibly close to half. Okay. And this indistinguishability-based FE scheme comes in different flavors, namely weakly selective, selective, and adaptive. And these all depend on the order in which these events occur. I won't be going into the details of all of these, and I would just like you to keep in mind that among these security notions, weakly selective is the weakest amongst them, and followed by selective, and adaptive is the strongest. So adaptive security implies selective, and this in turn implies weakly selective. And this is sufficient for this talk. Okay. Now, so an important parameter in the security model of FE scheme is the number of functional secret keys that the adversary is allowed to query for. And depending on that, we have two settings, namely the single key setting and the multi-key setting. So as the name suggests, in the single key setting, the adversary is allowed to query for a single functional secret key. And in the multi-key setting, the adversary can query for an a priori unbounded number of functional secret keys. So we know of constructions satisfying both the single key and the multi-key security. But a stark contrast in these constructions is the assumptions that they use. So while we know single key FE from standard assumptions like public key encryption as well as worst case lattice assumptions, all known constructions of multi-key FE either depend on indistinguishability obfuscation or on specific assumptions on multilinear maps. The starting point of our work is the question, is I/O inherent in the construction of multi-key FE? Or in other words, can single key FE be used to obtain multi-key FE? So in this work, we show that there exists a generic transformation from polynomially hard single key weakly compact FE to multi-key FE. And we crucially rely on the fact that the single key is weakly compact to arrive at an efficient transformation. But works by Ananthan Jain and Bitansky and Vaikuntanathan show that sub-exponentially hard single key weakly compact FE implies I/O, and we know how to get multi-key FE from I/O. So prior to our work, the best known construction of multi-key FE was from sub-exponentially hard single key weakly compact FE, and in this work we improve it to polynomially hard single key weakly compact FE. Any questions on this? Okay. So I would like to highlight two features of this transformation. So the first feature is that the multi-key FE that we obtain is fully compact even if the single key FE is only weakly compact. Recall that fully compactness implies that the running time of the encryption algorithm is independent of the circuit size. And the second feature is that the multi-key FE is selectively secure even if the single key FE is only weakly selective secure. So selective security is a stronger notion than weakly selective security. So just to be clear, this weakly selective security requires that the adversary to give all the function keys as well as the challenge messages before seeing the public parameter, which is it seems to be the weakest possible notion. And concurrently and independently, Lee and Michiancio obtained similar results as us, but using completely different techniques. Okay. Let's try to see what our results imply in the larger FE world. So the starting point, which is the starting primitive in the transformation, is a weakly selective single key weakly compact FE. And we show how to get selective multi-key FE with fully compact ciphertext in this work. Now we wish to go from selective to adaptive security. And there is a work by Prabhanjan, Zwika, Gill, and Vinod that says how to go from selective to adaptive generically, but their transformation is not compactness preserving. That is, even if we start with a fully compact selective FE, the adaptive FE that we obtain if we use our transformation is non-compact. But as noted in the work by Hemingway et al. In the construction of adaptively secure garbled circuits, if we start from a selective fully compact FE and use the transformation by Anant and Sahai on top of using adaptively secure garbled circuits, then we can obtain an adaptive multi-key FE with compact ciphertext. By with compactness, I mean that the running time of the encryption algorithm grows with the width of the circuit, which in general could be much smaller than the depth or the size. And this notion trivially implies adaptive multi-key non-compact FE. And this trivially implies selective multi-key non-compact FE. And this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. And independent works by Bitansky and Vaikuntanathan and Anant Jain and Sahai show how to trade multi-key security for compactness. So in particular, they show that if we start with a selective multi-key non-compact FE, then we can obtain a selective multi-key fully compact FE. So their transformation is additionally multi-key security preserving. But their transformation does not work in the adaptive setting. So even if we start with the adaptive multi-key non-compact FE, we cannot obtain an adaptive multi-key fully compact FE by just plugging in their transformation. And this notion trivially implies the first one. So what our result says that all these 5 notions of FE are equivalent under polynomial time reductions, because there is a cycle going around. And as I had mentioned before, the first notion implies I/O, but that suffers from an exponential loss in security. Any questions about this? Okay. So for the rest of the talk, I will mention the key tool that we use, which is Garbled Circuits, and say 2 EC2C properties of Garbled Circuits, which would be crucial to our result. And then I will give you a high-level overview of the construction assuming obfuscation, and then say how to replace obfuscation using polynomially hard compact FE. And then describe the main challenges that we face while doing this step. So we are all familiar with the notion of garbled circuits, so I'll just quickly go through. So a circuit garbling scheme takes a circuit and an input at which we want to evaluate the circuit on, and then produces a garbled version of the circuit and a garbled version of the input. The security guarantee is that given the garbled circuit and the input, all that you can learn is the output of the circuit on that particular input. Nothing else about the circuit nor the input is leaked. And we know how to garble circuits from one-way functions. So the first property is actually relatively easy to see, and it is called as independent garbling. So in the previous slide, I mentioned that the circuit garbling procedure takes the circuit and the input together. But if you want to garble them independently, then it is possible as long as these 2 procedures share some correlated randomness. So for those who are familiar with the garbled circuit construction, this correlated randomness would correspond to the labels of the input wires. So as long as the labels of the input wires are the same, you can garble the circuit and the input independently. So the second property is also easy to see, and it's called as multi-circuit security. Suppose we have 3 circuits, C1, C2, C3, and an input on which we want to evaluate each of them on. And suppose we garble them using the same correlated randomness. That is, each of those garbled circuits have the same set of input labels. Then multi-circuit security says that given these garbled circuits and the garbled input, all that you can learn is C1 of x, C2 of x, and C3 of x. Nothing else about C1, C2, C3 nor x is leaked. And this can be extended to any arbitrary number of circuits, not just 3. And at a high level, this follows from the multi-message security of the symmetric encryption scheme that we use. So that at each input gate, we will be replacing the garbled circuits. And it follows directly from Yahoo's proof of security. Okay. So I'll give you an overview of the construction assuming I/O. And I would like to mention that we cannot directly take any multi-key FE that is there that are known from I/O and then replace it with compact FE, because the techniques that we developed to use polynomially hard compact FE requires a new construction of multi-key FE, and I will be describing this new construction of multi-key FE from I/O. So let me give you some intuition behind our construction. The ciphertext of our scheme would be the garbling of the input labels. And the secret key would correspond to the garbling of the circuit. So given the garbled input and the garbled circuit, the decryption procedure just involves evaluating the garbled circuit on the garbled input. And recall that for a FE scheme, we must be able to generate the ciphertext and the secret key independently and property 1, which is of independent garbling, says that this translates to garbling the message and the secret and the circuit independently. And property 1 states that you can do this as long as the procedure for garbling the input and the garbling the circuit share some correlated randomness. And the main crux of our construction is achieving this correlated randomness in the public key setting using indistinguishability obfuscation at first, and then replacing I/O with compact polynomially had compact FE later. And notice that multi-circuit security, multi-key FE security of this construction directly follows from property 2, which says of multi-circuit security. So what does property 2 say? So given a garbled input and several garbled circuits generated using the same correlated randomness as in our case, then all that you can learn is the output of the circuit on that specific input. And this is precisely what multi-key FE security also states, because of the fact that the secret key is a garbled circuit and the ciphertext is a garbled input. Let me give you a high-level overview of a construction, but still in some abstract terms. So let's see how the public key of our FE scheme looks like. So the public key is an obfuscated circuit that has a PRF key K hardwired in it. This PRF key is the master secret key of our FE scheme. And looking ahead, this PRF key is used to derive the correlated randomness needed for garbling the input and the circuit. So this obfuscated circuit takes the message that you want to encrypt and some randomness as input and gives out I'm not too sure if you can see this. This is supposed to be a garbling of the input. So it's supposed to be shaded. So it produces a garbling of the message and a token. And the role of the token would be clear from the next slide. So we have seen the public key, and let's see how the secret key for a function f looks like. So it is again an obfuscated circuit that has a PRF key k, which is the master secret key of our scheme, and the circuit computing the functionality have hardwired in it. And it takes the token as input and outputs the garbling of this circuit. So the decryption procedure involves evaluating this secret key using this token and getting the garbled circuit, and then using the garbled circuit at the garbled input, which is part of the ciphertext, and obtaining the evaluation of this function on the input. And the role of the token is to provide a link between the public key and the secret key. And crucially, this token is there to ensure that each garbled circuit is evaluated on exactly one input. And this is crucial to argue the security of garbled circuits. That is, we evaluate every garbled circuit on exactly one garbled input. Any questions before we move on about? Okay. I think this is the worst time to give a talk. After lunch, the last hour of a long session. Okay. So let me give the construction in a little bit more detail. So how to exactly compute the token. So the public key, as I mentioned, is an obfuscated circuit that takes the message X and the randomness R as input, has a PRF key K hardwired in it, and it computes the token to be an output of a pseudo-random generator on the randomness R. And it computes the garbled input using the correlated randomness derived from the PRF key and the token, and it outputs the garbling of the input and the token. The secret key for a function f takes the input token t as the input and outputs a garbled circuit that is computed again using the same correlated randomness derived using the PRF key and the token, and outputs the garbled circuit. The construction of this is proved via the security of this construction is proved via the punctured programming approach of Sahai and Waters. And at a high level, we use a puncturable PRF key instead of a generic PRF key. And we puncture this PRF key at the specific token T star, which is part of the challenge ciphertext, and use the security of the garbled circuits to argue indistinguishability of the messages. And I won't be going into the details of this, but it is now we are so familiar with this punctured programming approach because there are lots of papers written about it. This is actually a straightforward exercise to argue security. Okay, now we have described how the obfuscation-based multi-key FE scheme, but our goal was to base it on polynomially hard compact FE. And the main idea is to simulate the effect of obfuscation using compact functional encryption. And the starting point of our construction is to use the FE to IO transformation of Ananthan Jain and Bitansky and Vaikunthanathan. But as I had mentioned before, this transformation incurs an exponential loss in security. And the reason for this as follows. So we have an obfuscation of C0, and we want to convert this to an obfuscation of C1 in the security proof. And the security proof proceeds by changing the obfuscated circuit from evaluating C0 at every input to evaluating C1 at that input. And this has to be done in an input by input basis. And since the number of inputs is actually exponential, this incurs an exponential loss in security. And as I mentioned before, this exponential loss seems inherent if we want to achieve the full IO security. But let's take a step back and see where exactly do we need the security of IO in the previous construction that I just mentioned. So if you do the hybrid argument, then you would have observed two hybrids, where in the first hybrid, we have the secret key, which is the original secret key, which is an obfuscation of a circuit that takes a token T as input and outputs the garbled circuit. And in the next hybrid, we will be changing the secret key to another secret key that has a PRF key punctured at some specific token and also has some specially generated garbled circuit hardwired in it. And it works as follows. So if T equal to T star, it outputs the specially generated garbled circuit. Otherwise, it computes the garbling of the circuit using the punctured key. And this C prime star is specially generated so that we ensure that these two these two circuits are functionally equivalent. So in particular, C prime star is the output of the original secret key on input T star. So that these two are functionally equivalent. So let's quickly check why these are functionally equivalent. At T equal to T star, they both output the same C prime star because of the way that we constructed C prime star. At all inputs apart from T star, because of the property of this punctured PRF key, which is same on all inputs apart from T star as that of the original key, these two circuits output the same value. And hence they are functionally equivalent. And we use IO security to argue that this hybrid is indistinguishable to the next hybrid. But if we look closely at these two circuits, then we would observe that these are not only functionally equivalent, but their behavior is same on all inputs except T star. So on all inputs apart from T star, these two circuits compute some PRF computation and output a garbling circuit. And this also does the same thing. And at T equal to T star, this outputs a hardwired circuit, whereas this still computes the PRF on, this still computes the garbled circuit using the PRF. And this is the key insight how we are able to base our security only on polynomially hard FE, because of the fact that instead of replacing the obfuscated circuit at each input from evaluating C0 to C1, as in the FE to transformation, it is sufficient to replace at just this special input T star. And this is the key insight how we are able to rely just on polynomially hard FE. So this is a very high level, but any questions? But making this idea work is not so straightforward, and we face some challenges, and I would just mention two challenges that we face. So the first is how to compute the token. In the IO-based construction, the token was computed as an output of a pseudo-random generator on the randomness R. But if we want to extend the same technique to the FE setting, it doesn't work. And we need to construct the token as same as the randomness R, but this R has to be generated as a public key of a semantically secure public key encryption. And the second challenge is which PRF to use. And in the IO-based construction, we used a puncturable PRF to use the punctured programming approach of Sahai and Waters. But here we need to use a special PRF called as the prefix puncturable PRF that we introduced in one of our earlier works with Omkar. We show that the GGM PRF is actually prefix puncturable. So I won't be going into the details of the actual FE construction because it's a bit more complicated. And I would like to conclude now. So we showed a transformation from single key weakly compact FE to multi-key fully compact FE. We showed that this result implies that 5 different notions of FE are equivalent under polynomial time reductions. But an interesting open question that arises from our work is, can we obtain adaptive multi-key FE with fully compact ciphertext from single key compact polynomially hard single key FE? The best adaptive FE that we could obtain was has width compact ciphertext, where the running time grows with the width of the circuit. And we know how to obtain adaptive multi-key fully compact FE from IO. So we know how to do this from sub-exponentially hard single key FE. But can we obtain multi-key fully compact FE from polynomially hard single key FE? That's it. Thank you.
All right, so in that case,
Yeah.